I will permit this, and we will bear with this for just a few minutes. It shouldn't be all that long, and thank you very much.
Article 1, that an additional $505,000 be raised in fiscal year 2014 real estate and personal property taxes for the purpose of funding the municipal government in accordance with the appropriations voted by the town at the May 14, 2013 annual town meeting for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2013, provided, however, that this vote shall not take effect unless or until the town votes by ballot to exempt this account from the limitations on taxes set forth in Mass General Law, Chapter 59, Section 21 CI, Proposition 2.5, so called.
Second.
We good? Good morning, everyone. My name is Bob Markel, and I've been in Templeton as the interim.
Hang on, Mr.
I'm sorry?
Did I hear a second on that? Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Now that I've heard a second,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Markel, you may proceed. Thank you.
Yes, I've been here since late January as the interim town administrator. Since the town is going to be addressing some very important financial issues this morning, I prepared a presentation that kind of frames some of the issues that we're dealing with. Here we go. Next slide. We're going to be looking at problems over the last 2 fiscal years. And obviously we have a new fiscal year coming on the 1st of July. So we're really talking today about 3 fiscal years and some of the problems that have developed. The state of Massachusetts Department of Revenue requires every city and town in the Commonwealth to file 2 forms every year. And it's important because if we don't file the forms, among other things, we can't set our tax rate and we don't get certification of free cash. The so-called tax recap form, normally filed at the beginning of the fiscal year. In that form, you must show to the state that your budget is balanced. If you don't show a balanced budget, then they will not accept the form, and then you can't set your tax rate. Mr. Moderator, there's a question here. Should we address the question? Gentleman has a question. This gentleman here.
Yes, sir. Could you define balanced budget? Because it means different things to different people, especially the United States. Balance means...
You don't have to be balanced at the federal level. State and local governments typically require both the state government and your local government to have revenues that meet the level of expenditures for the year. That's simply it. In other words, you have to have enough revenue to accommodate the amount of spending that the town meeting, in this case, adopts. The state has the same rule, and it applies to all cities and towns. And so you've got to show a balanced budget before, on the tax recap, before they will allow you to set your tax rate and send out tax bills. This is normally filed at the beginning of the year. Schedule A is normally filed at the end of the fiscal year. And as a result of that, the state will then certify something called free cash, which is the accumulation of any surpluses that you've had in your budget process over the previous year and even going back before that. So if you run a surplus, the state calls it free cash. And obviously it's important to have a level of free cash because it's part of your reserves. And you can use it practically any way you like. Next, please, Julie. As again, we're going to be talking about 3 fiscal years, 13, 14, and 15. We're currently in 14. New Year's Day for the state and local governments is July 1. So, and you skip ahead 1 year. So on July 1 of 2014, we enter 2015. Please, no. This can get confusing. Now I'll talk about fiscal 13, where we've had problems that have just been corrected. Can you, yeah, please. In fiscal 13, which ended last June 30th, last year. Schedule A was not filed with the Department of Revenue, and therefore we had no certification of free cash. Yes, please. Schedule A wasn't filed because cash reconciliation was not completed, and some entries into the general ledger were inaccurate and up to date. Please. In November, the town hired a forensic accountant to assist in updating financial data, and the state sent letters. Actually, a second letter was received on the 14th of this month saying that if you don't file Schedule A, we're going to cut off state aid. And that includes all categories that we get from the state. So that's a real threat. Next one. Schedule A was filed by March 14th. And the DOR certified free cash yesterday. It takes them a while to go through it, and if you had seen the email exchange, you went back and forth all last week to make sure that all the data in Schedule A was accurate and up to date. Please, next. Here's the letter that we received yesterday. I just dropped it into the slide this morning. It's from Bob Nunes, obviously Deputy Commissioner, Director of Municipal Affairs. It was sent to Fred Aponte, who was the acting town accountant, and he finished his work with the town yesterday. We don't have a town accountant as of today. And here's the information signed by Jerry Perry, the Director of Accounts. And here's the important information. It may be hard for you to see. The town not only does not have a positive free cash balance, we have a deficit of $26,000, $26,899 in the general fund. The sewer department enterprise fund has a surplus of $921,000, but the town has a free cash deficit. That is very rare, and as you'll see later on, the town has had free cash certified in the range of $800,000 a few years ago. So it's been a long way down in terms of the loss of free cash. Please, next slide. Now we're into fiscal 14. Obviously, we closed out fiscal 13 literally this week, literally yesterday, with the Department of Revenue. So we're closed out on that, and the bad news is no free cash and a deficit, which the town will have to deal with today. Now we're into fiscal 14, the current fiscal year that ends June 30th. It was discovered that the town has a $505,000 budget gap in the budget adopted at the May 2013 annual town meeting. Reason for the deficit? Well, I guess there's complex reasons there, but basically the town has lacked good financial data, largely because the financial management operation of the town has had a lot of turnover, and it's been fairly chaotic. One of the things that the town clearly needs going forward is a stable financial management system, meaning, among other things, assessors in place, obviously, who can do their work, a town accountant who can do the job, and a treasurer and a collector who can get the job done, collect the data, submit it on time to the state so that the town can have normal fiscal circumstances. Next, please. Here again, the tax recap cannot be submitted this year because we have to show a balanced budget. Tax rate has not been certified. Tax bills haven't been sent out since, what, December? They sent out two estimated bills, but a certified tax rate has not been established for this year. Next, please. As a result, the town is borrowing money to operate, pay bills and operate. A so-called tax anticipation note was issued several months ago in order to be able to obviously function normally. This is the reason for this special town meeting, addressing this problem. And this meeting has been delayed because it was hoped that free cash would be certified and that free cash, perhaps, and some other measures could be taken to close this gap. But obviously, this is not working out well. Next, please. Now, budget deficit, any budget deficit anywhere can be reduced in three ways. Reduce the budget. You can use one-time revenue, namely free cash, and stabilization fund, or you can ask for additional taxes. Those are the only three ways that we can deal with this $505,000 shortfall that we have. Next, please. In January, the Select Board mandated a 5% reduction in the operating budgets of all departments. This, however, if you look at the whole amount, it's going to provide about $148,000. Doesn't get you very far. Part of the reason for that is that as the year goes by, obviously you spend the money and you'd have less and less left to cut. Next, please. Surprise, no free cash. One-time revenues. Now, as I'm going to point out shortly, the town has consistently used one-time revenue to close a budget gap every year since maybe 10 years ago. I have data from 2007, but basically it's been using one-time revenue to close what we'll call a structural deficit, a permanent shortfall in revenue for the year. We have in the stabilization fund, which is the town's main reserve, this is the reserve fund, we have $103,000. And if we used all that, we will strip the town of any reserves, and then you're really in trouble if an emergency occurs. So that's not good. The Department of Revenue typically recommends that you have in your reserve about 10% of your operating budget in case emergencies arise. Also, if you use one-time revenue, now we know we can't, but if you did use one-time revenue to close the gap, the problem isn't solved because it's pushed forward into the next year, 2015. You still have that gap. Next slide, please. As I said, this is called a structural deficit, meaning a permanent deficit. It keeps going year after year, and it's been patched over in the past by the use of free cash. Here's the most important slide. Here's what the town has done over the years. As you can see, in fiscal 2007, the town used $784,000 in free cash to balance the budget of $4 million or so. In fiscal 08, it used $403 on a budget of $3.6 million. In fiscal 09, $665. Notice how this free cash fluctuates. That's why it's called one time. You never quite know what it's going to be. Although the pattern here is it seems to be going down. And so here's the trend here. Fiscal 11, fiscal 12, fiscal 13, $189,000 and a $4,000,006 budget. And so over the years, that has been the method that's been used here to cover a shortfall of revenue. Rather than use so-called recurring revenue that you get every year, like property taxes, town has used free cash. It works as long as you have free cash. Structural deficits can only be resolved by permanent reductions in services or additional taxes. Article 1 proposes a general override of Prop 2.5 by that amount of money. Here's the tax rates. I'm sure that people would like to know the information of what would happen if they vote for it. The tax rate for fiscal 12 was $14.60 per thousand. It went down to $14.12 because the senior center debt was discharged. And so that was an override. That was a debt exclusion, so-called. And when you discharge the debt, your tax rate goes down. In the fall of last year, the town voted another override, I think mostly for the schools, and that raised the rate this year. I guess if we're now going to get it certified, but the rate this year should be $15.26, and if the 505 is included this year in an override, the tax rate in fiscal 15, which begins July 1, would be $16.20 per $1,000 of value on your property. Okay. Having sat in town meetings before as a resident, I can tell you that the first thing that most people ask is, what are you doing besides asking us for more money? What are you doing to try and improve town government so that this doesn't happen again? I want to just go quickly the last few slides to tell you a number of measures are underway right now, initiated by the advisory board, the Board of Selectmen, and myself to try and make government more efficient, to try and consolidate some of our departments, and reduce expenses as much as we can. We have to get a new town accountant. I have one who will start Monday. It's going to be a 20-hour position, not a 40-hour position. We think that the job can be done by an accountant, by a good accountant, in 20 hours a week. There's a warrant article before you today to merge the treasurer's and the collector's offices. Most towns do it that way. Most towns have a treasurer-collector's office. Other departmental consolidations are being actively considered. Can I have the next slide, please? Also, the town has about $700,000 in uncollected back taxes. And so there is an effort underway to take the tax liens that we have that have been filed at the registry and to collect those taxes. There's two ways you can do it. You can go to land court and get the land court to foreclose, or you can sell those liens. The quicker way to do it, the way that we can do it between now and the end of the fiscal year, frankly, is to make sure the liens are up to date in terms of any payments made, and then to sell those liens. There are several companies that will buy them. I've checked with other communities in the Commonwealth, as well as the Department of Revenue. They recommend that that's an approach that we should use. We probably can't collect $700,000 because a big chunk of that is the factory that closed down, the American Tissue. But there are taxes that can be collected there. That comes in, and that would be, again, one-time revenue. It would boost free cash back to where it would be healthy, and it'll replenish reserves, in other words. Select Board has also appointed a tax title custodian to sell off town-owned property, foreclosed properties. No reason for the town to be a landlord and to own property. Selling it, you get some money, and also you restore the property to the tax rolls. So, next one, please. All positions in the town government organization are being evaluated. And while usually those who ask for sacrifice should make the sacrifice themselves first. Staff in the town, in the Board of Selectmen office, Town Administrator office, we've had 2 people for a number of years. It's down to 1. It's going to stay that way. Next one, please. A decision's coming on either continuing to rent Town Hall and, in conjunction with that, move other town offices that are scattered around into one building, saving on utilities and heat and light and so forth, or to move to another building that the town owns. Clearly, significant savings can be recognized by consolidating offices in one place, and, if possible, in a town-owned building. Also, bidding contracts. Some of the biggest expenses that we have in town are for health care and for health insurance, I should say, and for building and liability insurance. They haven't been bid for a while. It's been my experience over the years that you can realize some significant gains by rebidding those contracts and any other contracts that you have on a regular basis to get the best price. Budget cuts, consolidations, efficiency measures, absolutely necessary, but I think the reality is they're not going to close the gap. The only way to eliminate the gap for this year, the structural deficit, as we'll call it, and for next year and the future is to deal, unfortunately, with taxes. I think that's the last slide. Yes, okay, thank you. Sorry to take so much time, but these are complex issues that the town is facing.
I'm not worried about it. If I fall over here, then you could deal with the problem. Now, I'm going to ask you to reread the motion because it's been a long time since the motion had been read. Could we please reread the motion? It's been a long time with the presentation and what have you.
Move, is this on? Can you hear me?
Okay, go ahead.
Move that an additional $505,000 be raised in FY 2014 real estate and personal property taxes for the purpose of funding the municipal government in accordance with the appropriations voted by the town at the May 14th, 2013 annual town meeting for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2013. Provided, however, that this vote shall not take effect unless or until the town votes by ballot to exempt this amount from the limitations on taxes set forth in Mass General Laws, Chapter 59, Section 21CI, Proposition 2.5, so called.
Is there any discussion on this motion? Mr.
Mr. Moderator,
Spring.
the advisory board, not only you saw the presentation made by the interim administrator, we did do an initial study. In addition to that, it shows that stabilization money over a number of years were about $200,000 were used in addition to the free cash. And during the years of 2006 to 2011, our preliminary data shows that overlay and reserve money was also used. So based upon what you saw Mr. Markel end up presenting and what we had done for an analysis, the advisory board unanimously recommends a yes vote for an override.
Okay, all right, Virginia? Slide it over there, girl.
Through you, Mr. Moderator, I would like to ask Mr. Markel a couple of questions.
Sure, go ahead.
First of all,
One at a time. We'll take
Got it.
one question and one answer at a time.
okay. First of all, they're asking for a $505,000 override. Not once, but twice in the newspaper, Mr. Markel quoted that, it quotes Mr. Markel as saying that the deficit is now $378,000 because the Department of Revenue came in and said part of that 505 was not a problem anymore. So why, now even understanding that the new deficit from free cash for last year has to be added on to the 378, why are they not just asking for 404 now instead of 505?
The representative from the Springfield office of the Department of Revenue came to town about 2 weeks ago, and she spent from 9:30 in the morning till about 2 o'clock in the afternoon in our offices looking at various records and financial information. She said to me at the end of the day that there were 3 items that looked like they were going to favor the town and bring our deficit down to the level that you mentioned. I believe the total was $127,000 that would work out in our favor and reduce that deficit. In the later exchanges between our acting town accountant and the Department of Revenue representative, and I think our select board here has seen some of them, I think we probably had at least 12 different exchanges back and forth, and as a result of that, to my surprise, those numbers did not work out, according to the Department of Revenue, in our favor, in the town's favor, and to my big surprise, I was expecting that we would have significant free cash available. To open up that letter yesterday and see the shocking free cash deficit was as much a surprise to me as anyone. So the answer to your question, Ms. Wilder, is that what Debbie Wagner told me that day turned out not to be the case. According to their calculations.
Excuse me, Mr. Murphy, I understand that he answered your question, the fact that the Department of Revenue possibly erred in their earlier statement because they found out that these were not the facts.
Yes.
And that these, that unfortunately, it didn't play out in our favor as we would have hoped that it would have.
That is correct. That's correct.
Thank you for your answer. Second question to you is, the new accountant, is he going to be a CPA?
Yes.
Thank you. And I just have a comment over that. I cannot afford to continually raise my taxes every year. Now, this is the second time this year that they're going to be raised. I need to have some kind of stability. I have a fixed income and I need to have stability. I can't afford, because of mismanagement of funds, to have to pay more money all the time in my taxes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Ingram. Mr. Robinson, you're next, Mr. Robinson.
Hello, Ken Robinson, Old North Road. I wanted to speak to a question that I've received a lot from people in person or on Facebook, and that I haven't been able to answer, and I will continue to not be able to answer it, but hopefully can explain why. Since this the structural deficit was discovered back in late fall, I've asked repeatedly from various members of the financial team, most of whom are no longer employed by the town, to explain what happened.